just looking for some balance and some trust. I'm just looking for some mutual love, but all I get is unrequited. Why my world always on fire, never chilly. I used to hate the serious, I used to be so silly, but I'm not a kid no more. No, I'm not a kid, but I guess it's what we always said. Yeah, I guess it's what we always said. Hey, and we can get lost in an offbeat rhythm. Feel the way that you're moving, and I think that I get it, and I think that I will till the sun come up. When the sun go down, we gon' get in touch. Cause I don't even know, I don't know why. All your love I'm trying to find. I'm so lost in you and all that you do. Hey, and here we go, I never really know why. I'm just trying to take it slow, see where it goes. Cause you know that you never really know. Even though I can feel it in my soul, but you never know why. And here we go, I never really know why. I can't let it go, but you give me so much hope. So I gotta keep you close, yeah, you're giving me the most. And I never know, no, I never know why. All the silly things we hide, just to keep our peace of mind. No, I never know, no, I never know, no, I never know why.
It's the last day of the festival, and it is so cold outside. Everybody made a lot of snowmen. Oh, everybody wham wham. Everybody wham wham.
Up you.
Everybody wham wham. Everybody wham wham. Thanks for bringing me on your skelter. You have made my dreams come true. I am glad that we became good friends. Oh, everybody wham wham. Everybody wham wham. We sat by the fire that night. Everybody wham wham. It was cold, but you were by my side. Everybody wham wham. Everybody, we made it to the end. Oh, everybody wham wham. Everybody wham wham.
What up, misadventures?
Everybody wham.
Thank you for the lurk. I don't have a lurk command. I need one though. It's kind of
Everybody wham.
on the nose for a shark theme stream, isn't it?
Full contest prize. It belongs
Hey
to
Google,
a girl.
set a reminder for tomorrow at 10 a.m.
It belongs to a snowman.
Sure, what's the reminder?
Make a lurk command.
Okay, you've got a reminder at 10 a.m. tomorrow called Make Alert Command.
My name is Wham Wham, and I have a dream. A wholesome festival, but everybody feels happy.
What's up, Wheels? How you doing? I'm almost ready, just making my usual Discord post.
used to be so hard to see. Yeah, loving is easy when everything's perfect. Please don't change a single little thing for me. Listen, girl, when you can't even hide it, and it didn't take forever to find it. I was all on my own, almost glad to be alone until love came in on time, on time. So loving is easy, you have me fucked up. It used to be so hard to see. Yeah, loving is easy when everything's perfect. Please don't change a single little thing for me. Ooh, oh, oh, So listen, girl, when you can't even hide it, and it didn't take forever to find it. I was all on my own, almost glad to be alone until love came in on time, oh, on time. Loving is easy, you had me fucked up. It used to be so hard to see. Yeah, loving is easy when everything's perfect. Please don't change a single little thing for me. Ooh, oh,
Cyan Streams coming in again and sniping the first redemption. How funny. You got that right out from under y'all's noses this time. What's going on, everybody, and welcome in for another Tuesday. I got a good one lined up for you. Today we're going to talk about why I do this in the first place. Sharks and their importance in the ecosystem. Why do we care? Sharks are under a lot of pressure from several different sources, a lot of them man-made. Well, technically, if you trace it all back, all of them man-made, but we're going to start tonight by talking about what makes them so important. And then if we have time, we'll get into the different stressors that they deal with and what we can do to make a difference. If not, that'll just be what next Tuesday is about. But how's everybody doing? How was your weekend? We had a good one. We went to Dallas to visit my family. My cousin, whom I grew up with, got married. It was awesome. They had a beautiful wedding on a rooftop venue in Plano, Texas. Good food, good people. Had to run around like crazy people and visit with family. I always use an analogy of like the genie in Aladdin, where he's like, poof, what do you need? Poof, what do you need? When we have these like short turnaround trips to Dallas, that's what I feel like I'm doing. Like, hey, how are you doing? Okay, good to see you. Bye. Hey, how are you? You know. Feel like we're just running around with like a chicken with their head cut off trying to visit everybody, you know? So we got a notification from Stream Stickers. That's probably a good time to mention. I was just feeling squirrely, and I made all the stream stickers, all of my original stream stickers, free tonight. So if you're feeling like a renegade, feel free to grab any one of the stickers I've made and slap them on there. They are free at the moment, until I decide they should not be free anymore. If they get abused, we might just do that. Good, just chilling, waiting for tomorrow to come around because I'll hopefully have a new coffee maker. Ooh. So much clearer on the Xbox's YouTube app. Is it really? That's good to know. I wonder why. I wonder if you had the mobile one, first off, if you're on Wi-Fi on your phone. Secondly, if you had the mobile one set to like a lower resolution. Sometimes I manually set the mobile app for Twitch and or YouTube, if you're looking at a stream, to a lower resolution so that it'll buffer less.
All right, let's see how long that battle takes to bring him up.
There you go. That was one from our Jaws trivia night. Pretty good, didn't do much. Nothing wrong with that. Sometimes an uneventful weekend is the best kind. Was it super loud? It's not that loud for me. I sell sharks and shark accessories. I'll sell sharks and shark accessories. So there's a couple of things I wanted to share with you guys to kick things off on here. There's so for tonight, I want to explain to you guys and show you a little bit about ocean ecology, specifically how it pertains to sharks. What do they do? What are their roles in the ecosystem? How does it affect everything else? And more specifically, how does it affect us? So the long and short of why should we care about sharks and whether or not there are more or less toothy predators in the ocean. To quote my own brothers, why should I care if there are less toothy predators in the ocean? And I said, well, if you really want to get into it, starting at the very top of the food chain, working your way from sharks, dolphins, whales, all the way down to your phytoplanktons and algae and things like that. Not only do you need the sharks to ensure that you continue to have fish to eat, clear water to go partake in water sports in, fish, boat, swim, what have you, all the way down to how it affects the phytoplankton and algae and coral and how they produce air for us to breathe. So generally that's the first thing out of my mouth is, well, do you like breathing? Then you can thank coral reefs and ergo the sharks that support the life on those coral reefs. Granted, sharks can be pretty awesome on their own. I have my phone volume up. Since I don't have my headphones charged, yeah, that'll happen. No worries, dude. I want to make sure it wasn't something on my end, you know? I'm always worried that I'm effing up the audio balance. What is this? I found a Stream Beats playlist that's supposed to be like stream safe, non-DCMA stuff. And this song is just a loop of a dude saying 2 trucks having sex. Let's try this one. This one's called Jellyfish Bassa. It's a sign. Way better. Alright, but this is probably going to stomp over that here. Let me make sure I've got my Chrome audio is enabled. Okay. But first off, sharks are awesome. Maybe that's not enough for most people, but I personally like living in a world where I can watch stuff like this.
What is the true nature of the great white shark? Is it a solitary creature that prowls alone?
Or
or a social animal that hunts in packs?
I don't know, but I want to know now. Like, how cool is that? Anyway, that's a talk for another night. Let's like that. I'll watch that later. But sharks aren't just awesome, potentially terrifying, creatures. They're exciting to learn about, to see their behavior. But you would be surprised at how they can affect the ecosystem in multiple different ways. And I've pulled up, there's a short video on YouTube from It's Okay to Be Smart. These guys are fantastic, and they do a really, really good job of explaining how they give a couple of examples as well that we'll touch on later. I've got some notes on here. We're gonna go and do a deep dive on each one of these topics after the fact, but to get you kind of a rough explanation, I know, wasn't that a cool breach? To give you kind of a rough explanation of a couple of ways. First of all, like what the problem is, what the sharks do, and a couple of ways they can overfishing them, or just not taking care of them in ways we can affect, can blow back on the ecosystem. So let's walk through this video right now. So right off the bat, they're just kind of going through, this is an introduction, what's this video about? And you see there's a counter going in the corner.
So scary. Bloodthirsty beast just waiting.
We get it. But fast forward here a little bit to introduction.
There's more than 400 species of sharks on Earth, and they've owned the...
Actually, the number is now well over 500. Last I checked, the last number I heard was 515, and that was like a year ago, so there's even more of them now.
Ocean for more than 400 million years, since before the dinosaurs. Yet thanks to a combination of fear and neglect, we humans might just wipe them out in a few hundred. That bites. But why do we even care about
Might not
sharks?
even take that long.
You might think a few less sharp teeth in the sea would make for a better world, but that's not true. Let's imagine, just for a minute, what would happen if...
Wheels, there are so many different kinds of sharks. Let's see, actually, I just so happen to have the Princeton Field Guide on my desk. Let's see if I can... Okay, there's a species checklist on page 237. That's probably the quickest way to get a number. Yeah, okay, species checklists. This page is already in the 300s. Looks like this is the last page. All right. So documented in this field guide alone, that doesn't include anything that has been discovered since, what edition is this? This is like a 2013, I think. Excuse me a moment. This is a 2015 version of the field guide, so it's been corrected and added to since then. I noticed that this is how much of a nerd I am. I noticed an error in here that I'll show you at some point. They got 2 shark species swapped, and I thought that was kind of funny. But just in this 2015 version alone, there's 501. 501 unique species of sharks described. So the interesting ones to look at maybe make a much shorter list, like I think anybody who's just seen them on TV could probably maybe name 20 if they try really hard, your big intimidating sharks at the top of the food chain are really the ones that'll get the most coverage, but then you have like weird obscure ones that have barely been seen, like for example The lollipop cat shark. I like to use this as an example for some of the more obscure ones because, like, look at that. Look how weird this thing is. It's literally, like, shaped like a lollipop. It's got a big old head. That's why they call it that. Oop. Maybe I should move back to the other side because I'm always in the way on Google image searches. There you go. That's a better example. Lollipop cat shark. Nobody knows about that, right? Unless you're a nerd like me. Anyway, this is just a big rabbit hole. So, lots of species of sharks.
If we let that fear and neglect win, if we
The counter
ignore
just
what
keeps going
scientists
up.
and
We're at
nature are
260
telling
something now,
us,
270 is going up.
what if there were
few
no
every second.
sharks? By and large, sharks
What if there were no sharks? This is the interesting bit here.
are big fish, and one of Mother Nature's simplest rules is big fish eat smaller fish, which eat even smaller fish. And some of those smallest fish eat algae? Well, if we
Scoot, welcome in. How you doing? I picked this YouTube video to show you guys this specific section here because they do a very short. Gloppy, what's up? Hey. They do a very well broken down, abbreviated explanation of how the different trophic levels work. You know, like he said, big fish eats small fish, eats smaller fish, eats algae, whatever. So we'll let them break that down here real quick.
big fish, and one of Mother Nature's simplest rules is big fish eat smaller fish, which eat even smaller fish. And some of those smallest fish eat algae? Well, if we kill those biggest fish, those sharks, then instead of coral reefs, we could have this. Ugh. Or take my friend Ray. Ray likes to eat scallops, and this shark likes to eat Ray and his friends. So no shark, and it's an all-you-can-eat scallop Ray buffet. That's exactly what happened off the coast of North Carolina when sharks were overfished, and now there's no more scallops there.
True story. Scallop fisheries used to thrive in North Carolina, and then around 2000 to 2004, they started to decline because people had overfished the sharks that were feeding on cow-nose rays. Cow-nose rays, overpopulated, ate up all the scallops. So now, not only were the scallops already under fishing pressure from humans, but whatever was left got scooped up by the cow-nose rays.
That's bad for Ray and bad for us, because I happen to love scallops. Without sharks, the sick and injured fish that they usually eat could throw schools into chaos. And it's not always
This is an important detail because people talk about this like with wolves all the time, right? With land predators. They target the sick and the weak, meaning a part of their role in the ecosystem is, let's say, like a few of these fish here were diseased, right? They're not going to be able to evade the predators as well as a healthy fish. So they are the ones that get eaten. So without the shark around, the disease spreads much more easily throughout the schools of fish.
always about what sharks eat. Sometimes their mere presence can change the way that marine animals feed and behave. Most food webs are much more complicated than big fish eats little fish, which makes it hard to predict precisely what would happen in a shark-free ocean.
This is an actual food web somebody drew up. This is not just like a random visual aid they made for this. It's not AI generated. This is actual food web showing a whole trophic scale of a particular fishery. I don't know where, but how crazy is that?
But that doesn't mean it's a risk we should be willing to take. How about this? If you kill a shark, you pay for it. If you're in Palau, that'll cost you $2 million a piece. Research into the value of sharks to tourism show us that a living shark is worth way more than a dead one. Sharks keep ecosystems in balance, and that balance...
So, what he just said right here, this is something I harp on a lot. This is why I like to promote ecotourism as much as I can. This is what we were talking about, I think it was last week, where the Bahamas was the first country to ban shark fishing across the board, simply because they realized that a single individual shark could bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of ecotourism money into the country as opposed to killing that same shark and maybe getting $200 per pound of shark fins.
Way more than a dead one. Sharks keep ecosystems in balance, and that balance is the product of thousands, sometimes millions of years of evolution and adaptation. We don't know how or even if the oceans can respond to such sudden changes, because sharks are slow-growing species that don't breed often.
True.
And that makes them extra vulnerable. The ecosystems that sharks help manage cover...
We've talked about that a lot here, where, like last week, we were talking about, this may not have been last week, I don't know, time is a mystery to me, but we were talking about Greenland sharks and how they're not sexually mature and able to reproduce till they're 100 years old. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but totally different from bony fish and how quickly they can reproduce. So, and you have this delicate system of fish, coral, algae, plankton, zooplankton, phytoplankton, herbivore fish and crustaceans, and then carnivorous fish, larger carnivorous fish, and then your apex predators. Discovered the Chesapeake Bay used to be almost filled to the brim with mussels and was basically crystal clear. Now it's basically brown. Yeah. And we're going to talk about that a little later, actually, Gloppy, because I'm noticing that I've seen some photos of what it used to look like here in Florida, and I'm seeing it all around us more and more, just how human influence is kind of making a similar shift here and everywhere in the world. But where I live specifically is having some pretty shocking impacts on it.
Cover 2/3 of our planet. They provide us with more than half of the oxygen that we breathe, and 3 billion people rely on them for food and their livelihood. Whatever might happen in a world without sharks, it's not good for us. You've probably noticed that number getting bigger. That's how many sharks were killed while you watched this video. Each year...
Okay. He just said that this ticker in the corner, which you can't see because of my goal bar, there you go. That's been ticking up at about this rate.
Humans kill more than 100 million sharks, 70% for their fins.
So if what he just said is true, 700 sharks just died in the time it took us to watch this video. That's not including all the pauses I just did to talk about it. That's right, Mita. Fertilizing your lawns actually is a huge problem with it, especially if you live on a waterway.
Which are made into soup, the rest by habitat destruction, or just thrown away as bycatch from fishing. How many people do sharks kill?
There's actually way more factors than that. So, shark fin soup, that is a pretty alarming factor in what the pressures that sharks are under. And we may get to the different things that put pressure on sharks tonight. We may have to put that off till next week. I'm not sure yet. We'll see how it goes. But there's a lot more than this. In total, let me see, where's my list? All the different problems faced by sharks. You have ocean acidification, which is a result of pollution, most of which is industrial runoff and wastewater runoff from us, and fertilizing, both farms and yards and what have you. Competing with humans for food, so overfishing. Overfishing of their food, overfishing of sharks, both intentionally, which is mostly for the shark fin soup industry, and being overfished themselves as bycatch. So long line fisheries, putting out miles and miles of line with hundreds of baited hooks, and a huge percentages of those being sharks that are then cast over the side because that's not what they were targeting. Or, even worse, they sometimes sell it as fake fish and just call it flake or some other name like that. And then you have culling due to misunderstanding of ecology, which is something that is a huge problem in Florida here, and we'll talk more about that later. But essentially the issue is that people think there are too many sharks because there are too few fish to catch, and the fish that they do catch are often stolen by sharks. And then loss of habitat is something he talked about here, that 30% habitat destruction. That I feel mostly affects the smaller sharks that live on reefs. But that is a huge factor as well. Loss of habitat is something that impacts not just sharks, but everything. And we'll get back into more of that later. But what's going on up here? Neilf, welcome in. Hey, how you doing? Scoot, thanks so much for gifting a sub to Neilf. Neilf is one of our good buddies we've met over in Science Streams' channel, whom I'm going to toss a shout out to right meow, because let's be real, they're awesome. Yesterday they were celebrating their 2-year partner anniversary. It was a whole heck of a lot of fun. They featured a song made by yours truly that was a lot of fun to make. And they're just wonderful people, and happened to be the redeemer of our first redeem this stream and like both of the previous 2 streams. That 2-year party was awesome, wasn't it? All right, let's see how he wraps this one up, because I actually don't remember.
Fishing. How many people do sharks kill? Not many.
Okay, it's
Come on
it's
in.
bigger than one.
Let's have some real
You
talk.
get the idea.
Time after time in movies and during certain week-long specials on cable TV, sharks are portrayed as these dangerous monsters, like toothy terrors of the deep that are just out to get
What's
us.
that?
But if movies have taught us anything, it's that the scariest monsters are the ones that we don't see.
Scooter,
The
thank you
ones
so
that
much for
remain
gifting a sub to Science
mysterious.
Streams. I know he's going to love that.
All this week, a bunch of our favorite YouTube channels have teamed up to bring you awesome shark science. So go check them out. Remember, the more you know, the less you'll fear. Stay curious.
I love that sentiment. I say that a lot. The more you know, the less you have to fear. And I know a lot of shark scientists and divers and just fans of finned creatures that know and repeat often that the more you know, the less you have to be afraid of. I hear conservation organizations, I can't remember which one said this, but there's a statement that somebody used called replacing fear with fascination, and that's kind of taken off, and I've heard more and more people use that line since then. So, let's dig into some of the nitty-gritty of this stuff. So, what do sharks do specifically for the environment they live in? Well, UC Santa Barbara had a paper on one thing they do for the environment. Let me get this article posted in the chat real quick before we go any further. Learn about it, don't fear, but always respect. Yeah, totally. And I feel not just that, but like literally the more you know about them and their behavior, the less scary it is. The more you know how to conduct yourself in their environment. What was that? Science Streams with a 100-bit donation. Thank you so much, dude. You know how to do that. I appreciate it though. Don't you have like a stream to be doing, or aren't you going live in like 12 minutes? Miss Adventures in Astro also with 100 bits. Thanks so much. Are you trying to chew some stuff in here? You trying to chew all the chews? Let me get that article out there. Neilf. Thank you. I need to make some more stickers. By the way, so that is usually how, like, something I've done to try and make people feel like they get something out of cheering with bits, is I make stickers with stream stickers. And tonight, I haven't made a lot of them, but the ones I have made are free. Except for one, I don't think I can make that one free. There's one that uses my voice. It's a speech-to-text model of my little shark character. This guy talking, and then it's my voice. I think that one's not free. I don't think I was able to make that one free because the text-to-speech models are categorized differently on stream stickers. You guys did it. You did, in fact, start a hype train. Look at that. You guys are awesome. I don't even know what to do with that.
A what?
What? You even know, like, that's... I don't even know if most people realize that's a Jaws reference. They caught a shark and they didn't know it was a tiger shark, and this guy's like, I think it's a macaw. Jaws, what? Tiger shark, what? Yeah, here we go.
Deep throat, Brad. Yeah, but what kind? What kind?
This is how I feel all the time when I'm talking to people about sharks.
Deep throat, Brad. Yeah, but what kind? What kind of shark?
It's a tiger shark.
A what?
A what? The guy couldn't even say Mako. Before that clip starts, he's like, I think it's a macaw. You know, because they're just like a bunch of weekend warrior fishermen. They don't know what the heck they're looking at. Yeah? That's how you feel every time you watch that. A what? So, all right. One thing, we'll get back into what we're really getting down to the nitty-gritty of sharks and their direct influence on the environment. Reeling it back in. So, one thing they actually do, and I feel like Science's ferret puppet could have probably touched on this during their poop week on social media, is they quite literally fertilize coral reefs. So, shark eats fish, shark poops out fish, shark poop then feeds coral and algae and phytoplankton and zooplankton. So you literally would not have the coral reefs or the creatures living on the coral reefs if you did not have the sharks producing decomposed fish for that stuff to feed upon. So anemones and things like that. Hey, what's up, Jay Wiggy? Welcome in. How you doing? Hope you had a good weekend. We learned a thing for the Prime subs. You have to activate Prime Gaming, not just link the accounts. You're already linked, but look for the... Oh, yeah, that's right. We had some people asking about how to... some friends and family asking about how to give their Prime sub. Because they were like, okay, we linked the Amazon Prime account, but that wasn't enough, and it still didn't show up. And I didn't realize you actually have to go to the Prime Gaming website and activate Prime Gaming also. It's a whole thing. I'd show you, but mine's already linked and it doesn't look the same. So long and short of it with this, and you can read the article yourself if you have any interest in that, but that is one way that sharks give back to an environment. It's not just by what they feed on and keeping disease from spreading. Scooter, thanks so much for gifting a subscription to JWig. I know they appreciate it. That's an old buddy of mine. Well, let's look at a snippet here. What does this say? Our studies show that large mobile predators such as sharks may be a very important source of nutrients for even the smallest reef creatures such as corals, said co-author Jennifer Cassell. I thought they were going to list stuff, they did not. But corals, small crustaceans, the algae that lives inside the coral, anemones, sponges, you get the idea. There's a lot of tiny things living on a coral reef that all benefit from this. The research biologist at the Marine Science Institute, the role of sharks as top predators is well understood, but their role as nutrient vectors is far less studied. It's very true. It was actually surprisingly hard to find a scholarly article on that topic. But we did. But so, okay, for starters, sharks actually directly provide nutrients. And some of them, like, what species was it? I was just reading about this earlier. I think it was, not black tips, but gray reef sharks. Gray reef sharks, for example, might feed on things that are in deeper waters and then come back and excrete that waste in the shallow water where the reefs are. So they're not just providing nutrients, they're bringing them from different locations. And it's those interactions that wouldn't happen otherwise without them. So that, because those nutrients has to come from somewhere, right? Open that hype chest. What do we get? Frog ponder emote. Oh, I dig it. That's a fun one. He's got like a loading bar over his head. That's great. He looks like a balloon animal. I think he is supposed to be a balloon animal. Have fun. Controlling populations of their prey is another thing. So we saw that diagram where they had a bunch of different fish. They kind of looked like cod or something, right? And see, I wish I had an infographic for this that really did it justice. Let me see if I can find you a good one. So keeping disease from spreading. Like we said, people talk about land predators a lot in this regard. I hear people talk about wolves a lot, saying that like they prey on the sick and the weak, and that keeps things from getting out of control. All right, this is that's kind of a basic one. I don't want to use that. What about this? That's not a bad example. Open image, a new tab. There we go. So here they're showing 4 different levels of predation. Your phytoplankton, your seagrass, your algae here in the bottom, snails, zooplankton, and blue tangs in the first order consumers, meaning they're consuming the plants. Then you have predators that feed upon those things, and your top level predators which feed upon those predators. Now a shark may prey on, let's say, these yellowtail snappers, black groupers, and barjacks. And they're only succeeding in catching, most of the time, the ones that are injured or sick, meaning they have either a disease or a parasite, or parasite riddled. And in doing so, they keep those parasites or diseases from spreading throughout the reef to other animals, whether that be members of their own species or otherwise. So something people may or may not think about often is that and this is true for land predators too, so like wolves hunting deer or whatever grazer they go after, they may prevent disease from spreading to other members of the herd in doing so. And maybe they were only able to catch an individual because it was either just old or had some kind of disease. Or maybe it was maybe a lot of parasites, whatever. You get the idea. Same thing goes for sharks. 100%. So without them there doing that, or if there's not enough of them, let's say these grouper, for example, will overpopulate. There'll be nothing preying upon the weak and the sick, and that makes it so much easier for the disease to spread from fish to fish, especially because there's more of them. There's more hosts for it to spread to, but also there's nothing killing There's nothing removing the individuals that are infected. So the more they overpopulate in the absence of predators, the more that problem extrapolates. This is gonna feel more and more like a PowerPoint as we go on, and now that I think about it, I probably should have made one. But that's how sharks control populations of their prey. And that guy in the video earlier used this story as an example. This is an article from the National Wildlife Federation that actually describes the breakdown of the scallop fishery in North Carolina. What is this section he said about epic slaughter here? Blockbuster movie Jaws may have scared beachgoers out of the water when it appeared in 1975, but it also sparked the beginning of an epic disaster for sharks worldwide. Unfortunately, that is very true. Even as the film was playing, recreational fishing clubs, particularly in the United States, began hosting tournaments and competitions specifically targeting sharks, often offering prizes for the biggest fish landed. Thousands of sharks were killed, and nearly as many trophy photos taken. And in nearly every case, the carcass was simply wasted. By 1985, shark numbers in the U.S. waters had already declined so steeply that recorded landings by recreational fishermen had dropped 45% compared to a decade earlier. Wow, that's crazy. But demand for sharks truly exploded when commercial anglers discovered the lucrative market for shark fins. That's where things really kind of spiraled out of control, as they started to realize that shark fin soup is like this status symbol in Asian countries. And so pretty quickly it became illegal to, really over the past decade, it became illegal to just keep the fins and throw the rest back in the United States. Really wasn't hard to make a case for that, given how wasteful that practice is, and how just how generally messed up it is that they would often cut the fins off and leave the animal to suffocate as it sinks to the bottom or bleed out or be ate by something else. Here's a link to this article if you want to give this a look. Oop. Didn't quite work. Can I make that work? No, probably not. Well, it's called Most Important Fish in the Sea by National Wildlife Federation, if you care to look it up. But essentially, they're just describing that very situation in which hammerheads were overfished. Hammerheads feed on stingrays, which is the topic of my next song for Bite Force, Bring the Hammer Down. We can get into that on Thursday a little bit. But cownose rays, that's one of their main predators, is great hammerheads. So without the great hammerheads around to thin the schools of cownose rays, the cownose rays went gangbusters and fed on scallops in North Carolina completely uninhibited. So what was previously a very successful scallop fishery started experiencing a dramatic shortage that I don't believe they have recovered from yet. Scallops, sharks, soup, fins. I think you mistook the note-taking emote for the skill issue one, but but I like where your head's at, Turgis. The emote artiste over here. So yeah, not only is it important for, like, they serve an important role by feeding on things for two reasons. One, they're keeping directly this population of rays, for example, from going, from overpopulating and spreading disease amongst themselves and to other fish, but also keeping them from depleting whatever it is they feed upon. if that makes sense. In this case, it's scallops, but it could be anything else. Like, let's say we're talking about a reef shark feeding on a grouper, right? Same deal. If that grouper eats, I don't know, let's say shrimp. I'm just making stuff up here. And then suddenly that shark is overfished. That reef shark is overfished. Now there's an abundance of grouper, and people think, oh, great, more grouper to catch. Yeah, but that they're going to now wipe out the shrimp that they're feeding on. So now that shrimp is gone. And what's going to happen beyond that? It never stops there. It always goes one step further, all the way down. They call it a trophic cascade, when everything starts to break down below that point. So let's say below that point, what is that shrimp feeding on? More likely, algae. So now that that shrimp is wiped out because the overpopulated grouper that ate that shrimp, now algae is going to bloom out of control. If I look at oceanic algal overgrowth, that's a very specific search. Yeah, okay. This is a perfect example of a reef that has been decimated by algal overgrowth. Let me open these up. You can see this is kind of a blurry image, but you see the algae is kind of growing over the surface of the corals. Some of the corals that are not covered have already bleached. They're already dead. Corals go through two phases when they're under stress and dying. First, they fluoresce really brightly as kind of a last-ditch effort to save themselves. Their fluorescence happens as a form of sunblock. So if they're too close to the surface, getting too much sunlight, they'll turn bright colors. They push chemicals to the surface of the exoskeleton to kind of protect themselves from the sunlight, and they fluoresce. And then after that, when they actually die, they turn white, bright white. That's referred to as bleaching. After that, you start to see the coral actually break down. And I don't think this was a coral. Actually, this is a sponge that's covering this. It might be a sponge on the whole structure. But you will see after that, when it's actually dead and decaying, the coral will have lots of mossy looking algae all over it like this. So the final stage is algae covered dead coral. Okay, yeah, this is a perfect example. Here's some staghorn. No, this isn't staghorn. I don't know what kind this is. Scooter, thank you so much for the gifted sub to Turgis. Turgis has some shark emotes of his own, but you just expanded your collection, sir. Enjoy. I still need a couple more. I need like one animated one and one more still one at least. I know there's probably more than that. Anyway, so you can see here, previously this coral bleached. You can see the bleached tips here, and the algae is starting to cover the dead coral. And after this, it just starts to break down. So many interconnections in nature, dude. That is so true. On the phone, so searching sucks. Yeah, that'll happen. I've had so many problems with the mobile app lately. It's crazy. There's a lot going on in those emotes. It's like a shark mosh pit. I confiscated a great white in New Jersey once during a shark tournament. What? Did you take pictures? Please tell me you took pictures. That's so cool. Y'all, Turgis used to be, or used to, right? Not currently, Coast Guard. Let's get a shout out for Mr. Goose. What do you mean by shout outs are on cooldown? Fine, I can still give you one of those. 2009, pretty good cell phone cameras. Ah, okay. Yeah, I think that was when I got my first iPhone. Pretty sure. The 3G, that was that time. That was when I got the first smartphone. So I was talking to somebody who's a boomer friend of mine the other day. So I don't even remember what we were talking about, but he looks at me and goes, we were talking about smartphones, and I was like, oh yeah, you can do this on your phone. There's an app for this now. Like, thinking, yeah, this is cool. You should check it out. And he looks at me and says, Parker, my phone is a phone. I don't know why. I thought that was so funny. Like, I only use it for that. Ugh, that one's kind of gross. So this is what it looked like the last time I went scuba diving in the Florida Keys. This was in like 2018. This is not a picture from that, but it's what it looked like. The algae hadn't set in yet, but all these bits and just piles of broken coral. They'd just been hit by a hurricane the year before in 2017, and the coral was just rubble. And then I'm sure this algae covering it is the next phase. We actually went to the Florida Keys, my wife and I did, just last October. And we snorkeled a little bit. About like 30 minutes out of the harbor. And y'all, the water quality had gotten so bad. I regret this, but I didn't keep any of the footage. I threw it out. It was that bad. We saw like some sponges, a few coral heads, maybe like 4, but they were not thriving. There was lots of algae. The water was just pea soup green. It was really rough. I should have kept it though, just to kind of illustrate the differences like this. But you can see what I'm getting at here with the algal overgrowth. So things that feed on the algae, if they get overconsumed, or maybe they fall victim to disease because their consumer is not consuming them, you end up with an algal overgrowth, big algal blooms, oftentimes toxic algal blooms that have massive impact on the ecosystem. And we'll touch on that again later because, as I said before, that's something that's really, really hit home for me in a big way. Was a juvenile great white, 12 feet. They thought it was a large mako. I think Fish and Game ended up confiscating it. His $180,000 boat. Whoa. Yeah, so you know what? Actually, we can touch on that now. Or I'll get the footage pulled up. I have, yeah. All right, I've got it handy. We'll look at that in a minute so I don't forget. But there's, I mean, I could probably go on about water quality and our contributions to it for hours. I won't, don't worry, but there is a lot to it, and mostly agriculture is to blame for one reason or another, either directly causing it through fertilization or rerouting waterways to accommodate farmland. So sharks controlling populations of their prey, that's an example. That was all just to illustrate that. It's not just directly the thing that they eat, but everything underneath that trophic level that can be affected by any change in diet or the presence of sharks, which more often than not, and there have been studies that prove this, that they find that the more sharks there are, the more life that reef is able to support, right? And that's why, because not only are they cleaning up the diseased animals but like we said, their presence is actually fertilizing and causing more life on that reef. And the more coral, the more algae, the more sponges, the more all that stuff living on the reef that you have, the little crustaceans that eat both those nutrients that come directly from the sharks and from the plant life. The more you have of that, the more you can have of every other level all the way back up. So sharks really kind of give back to the whole food web in that way. And alternatively, the less of them you have, the more you overfish the sharks, the less of everything else on that web that area can support. Okay, here's an article I found really fascinating. So last year, every year in the summer, I go to a convention in Tampa that Florida International University puts on in conjunction with National Geographic. You can tell they work together a lot because a lot of their scientists, like Dr. Mike Heithaus, they're featured on Shark Fest. Nat Geo Shark Fest is their version of Shark Week. I think it tends on the side of a little more educational than the content you see on Shark Week, where Shark Week is more like exciting, dramatic content. And Shark Fest is a little more on the educational side and talking about the science that they've been working on and will be working on, etc., and what it means for us and them. So Nat Geo and FIU work together to put a convention together called SharkCon. And they have booths from vendors to the scientists themselves. People give talks on different studies they've done, what it means, like we said, both for us and, fishermen and the animals, the ecosystems, all that stuff. And they produced this article about the ecological importance of sharks. That was something that this aspect of it was something that never occurred to me until we saw this talk last year. And I'll post that in the chat here as well. I'm batting 1,000 with these links. What happens if I click that? Is that even gonna... Yeah, okay, it comes to it anyway. Sweet. So, we'll keep that going. This is pretty... Essentially what they're saying with this is it not... So, sharks have an important ecological impact on whatever ecosystem they're found in for a multitude of different reasons, and we've already touched on a couple of them, right? The direct nutrient reintroduction to the reefs, controlling disease, controlling populations of fish they feed on. But there's something they covered here that I thought was fascinating, and it's not something that would occur to most people. Let's see. I just searched for tiger shark and seagrass. Am I going to get pictures of... Okay, perfect. All these pictures you see of these tiger sharks have something in common. Wherever you see the tiger shark, you see a bunch of seagrass, right? Seagrass is a food source for a lot of different marine animals. Dugongs, manatees, sea turtles, all kinds of stuff eats seagrass. But while they were studying tiger sharks and their habitat and kind of how loyal they are to a specific spot, they noticed this correlation that wherever you had like a hunting ground, we'll call it, for a tiger shark, there was more seagrass in that area. Because the things that they prey on, manatees and sea turtles, wouldn't come near. They would know that there is a tiger shark present in this area and they wouldn't come there. So kind of to oversimplify it, the tiger sharks are kind of guarding the seagrass from consumers coming in and eating it. Which is something I never considered before, and I think most people probably wouldn't. That just the presence of a predator would make it easier for seagrass to thrive. And I'm sure this carries over probably to other plants or sponges or whatever. So sharks can have a positive impact on an ecosystem by regulating that process of grazing on ocean plant life. So literally just by being there, they're having a positive impact just by being around. And the reason this hit home for me so much is because I know how quickly grazers like manatees can come in and wipe them out. They've been trying to figure out a solution. They've been trying to figure out how to keep seagrass thriving in Southeast Florida for years. With how bad the water quality's gotten, it's become a big struggle with how much boating is popular. You know, like boats tear up the seagrass. There's a multitude of things that put a lot of pressure on the seagrass. And then what happens is you have groups of manatees will migrate through seasonally and just eat all of it, like completely wipe it out. And so then conservation organizations will come in and plant. They'll host outings where they'll take citizen scientists out with them to wade into the water and actually like manually plant seagrass in little fields. And then, you know, the next day manatees will come and eat all of that. So I've heard they'll come and eat all of it within a few days. So it's kind of like chasing their own tail to try and keep the seagrass thriving. But if you had more predators in the area, might not have that problem. It might solve itself. Let's see what this quote is all about. The loss of sharks from ecosystems could have catastrophic consequences for our oceans. Yeah, true that. Why might these roles be... Let's see what they said on here. This looks interesting. Why might these roles be important to ecosystems? The research reveals sharks may be especially important when preying upon longer-lived species. Maintaining specialized diets in a number of prey species or preying upon species that have their own important ecological roles. That is crazy, right? Yeah, that's something you never think about, Neil, to that point. You never really think about drawing any kind of connection between sharks and plants. Because immediately you think sharks are carnivores, so you know, why would that even enter your mind? But actually, in fact, they found out that some sharks, specifically bonnetheads, when they're young, are omnivorous. Bonnetheads are this super cute little hammerhead here that you see. This one is a juvenile. They grow up, they look like that. When they're babies, they find that they eat a lot of seagrass to get a little extra nutrients. This is, to my knowledge, the only confirmed occurrence of sharks eating plants. Oh man, you can really see that pimple on my nose, like a headlight. I look like Rudolph over here. Maybe I should stick to my good side here. But yeah, so that's just an example of something. We learned that about the bonnetheads eating seagrass within the last 5 years, I think. It's just another example of how much more there is to learn about their behavior and what can come from that. Knowing that changes the way we look at that ecosystem completely, because now we know that for bonnetheads to thrive, there has to be seagrass in that location. Otherwise, that's a piece of their diet that's missing, that they'll then have to replace with something else. Direct predation on prey, that's something we talked about earlier. few empirical data to support the mechanism of influencing prey population sizes. So, like we said about shark eats fish, which eats smaller fish, and how that predation regulates both of those tiers in the trophic scale. Behavioral or physiological responses in prey. So this is what we're talking about here. The behavioral change might be, in this case, the prey not coming and eating all the seagrass in that patch where the tiger shark lives. Let's see what they said here. A large body of evidence shows that prey taxa, from small fish to marine mammals, change their behavior in response to risk from sharks. So the presence of the shark might deter that animal from living in that area or foraging in that area. But the consequences for wider ecosystems is only documented in a few key locations so far. In Shark Bay, Australia, a multi-decade study has shown pervasive effects of sharks on behavior of prey, and that these behavioral effects cascade to the structure of seagrass communities and enhances resilience to climate disturbance. Meaning, so when they say enhances resilience to climate disturbance, so more seagrass, thanks to Mr. Tiger Shark, means more carbon, more greenhouse gases absorbed, and more oxygen produced. That's what they mean by saying that it's more resilient, more climate resilient, or resilient to climate disturbance is what they called it. So many animals depend on seagrasses, food, and places to hide. Yeah, absolutely. It's extremely important. So a lot of people don't realize just how much so. On coral reefs, the presence of sharks may result in spatial variation in algal and coral cover based on the relative safety of different microhabitats. More studies of indirect effects on risk of reefs is needed. That's really interesting. So on coral reefs, the presence of sharks, so whether or not there are sharks on a specific reef, may result in spatial variation in algal and coral cover. So whether or not there are sharks present will affect the variety and spacing out of coral and algae that you find in a specific location. And they're saying what kind of cover that will offer for the different animals. What they say is based on the relative safety of different microhabitats. So that is to say that, like, if you have a big coral head like this, right? You got a big coral rock here. This provides a lot of little hidey holes for parrotfish and things like that that this shark may prey on. Which I think that's a white tip, maybe? Judging by that little white tip in the dorsal fin. Now, if there was just like the little rubble coral on the center and right, not a lot of hidey holes for Mr. Parrotfish. So the parrotfish is going to go seek out a bigger coral head like this with some nooks and crannies that it can hide in, right? That's what they're talking about. But if that coral, or if that parrotfish, if that coral's not there, the parrotfish isn't going to be there. And parrotfish might be the food for this reef shark, so it's not going to bother hunting in places where it knows there's no habitat for its prey to hide in. But really, it really does all tie together. When you think about any living thing you see on a specific reef, it all has some kind of connection. Turns out even the seagrass. Crazy to think about. You know what else is crazy to think about is the fact that we haven't given a shout out to A Date Night In. They do gaming streams, cooking streams, and just recently came out with their first cookbook. They're now published authors, and just generally a really cool community and a great stream. Check them out. We got an ad popping up in 3, 2, 1, go. I don't think that matters right now because I'm pretty sure everybody in here is subscribed. Mostly thanks to our friend Scooter MC. Somebody really hates ads. Alright, what's next on our little list? So this is kind of just reiterating that, but in this case, the plant is a little different. The plant is algae instead of seagrass.
A what?
A what? So this article I just posted a link to here. This one is actually from an organization that everybody, I think, in the United States is familiar with. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. So the presence of sharks can help keep algae in check. What that means, like we were saying before, let's say shark preys on predatory fish. Predatory fish preys on parrotfish. Parrotfish is eating algae. Right? It's eating algae off of the coral. Without the shark, you remove the shark from that equation. Let's say that some fishing trawler came in, fished up all the sharks in that habitat. Now the grouper overpopulates. That grouper eats those overpopulated groups of groupers. Let's say that 5 times fast. Feed on the parrotfish and decimate the parrotfish populations. Well, then you end up with an environment that looks a lot like those photos we were just looking at earlier, where the coral is now completely covered in algae. Then the algae will eventually choke out the coral. And you start to see a shift from there are different types of ecosystems in the ocean. That's a pretty blanket statement, but when it comes to shallow areas near the shore, you have your coral dominated waters or reefs and your algae dominated reefs. And kind of what I feel like we're watching happen in the Florida Keys is a shift from a coral based reef to an algae based one. Which is probably a good segue into what I was going to show you guys. Let me get that footage pulled up. Scuda is a legend indeed. Alright, so our ad breaks up in 30 seconds. So I pulled up some photos that have been taken by scuba divers over the years in Key West. Here's some examples of healthy coral from out there, and these are a little older. I don't think any of these are recent photos. This one may actually be recent. This is somebody taking a survey. They're counting corals of different species. But this is what you should see, and probably still can in some locations down in the Keys at certain times of the year. But not where we went. Not in any of the locations I've been. Basically everything you see down here at the bottom, just kind of like algae covered rocks and the occasional soft coral and small plants. That's really all I saw. I saw one big barrel sponge. That was pretty much it. But here you have the entire scale of the whole ecosystem. You have everything from the plants, tiny shrimps and phytoplankton, all the way up to large fish, herbivorous fish, probably even some predatory fish hiding in some of these little hidey holes in the coral. And everything from anemones to hard coral to soft coral and sponges. So a completely healthy ecosystem with every stage that comes with. Now, unfortunately, the change I've seen is from that to something more like this, where you see staghorn dying off. Here's the difference. This is what I'm talking about. This is actually what staghorn looks like when it's fluorescing. So this is the bits, these brown parts you see here. This is the bits of the coral that are like fluorescing as a last-ditch effort to survive. And the totally white coral, it has bleached, has died. The coral has a really unique structure, actually. Let's take a look at that. I'm sure somebody has a good infographic for that. Let's look at coral anatomy. That doesn't take long. Okay, well, this is maybe too in-depth. This is not the example I'm thinking of. But essentially, you have coral has a bony exoskeleton on the outside. Now, this is all coral polyps. This is not what I'm looking for. They have a bony exoskeleton, and they're hollow in the middle. And the animal itself lives inside that exoskeleton, and then you have... Does this show it? Algae living inside the exoskeleton in the middle. There's got to be a good illustration of it. Yeah, okay. So there's a symbiotic relationship between coral and algae that live inside of it. So here you can actually see some of the coral polyps that you'll watch them when they feed. They kind of grab like this at particles that swim by, but they can either extrude themselves out of the coral's calcium exoskeleton or retract back into it for protection. They come out to get food, and then they scrunch back inside the little crevices of it to protect themselves. But inside of them, you can see they are a host to algae. This algae is, I don't know what kind it is. It's a very specific type of algae. I'm sure it may be different depending on the species of coral. But then that algae produces nutrients for the coral through photosynthesis. So that algae is now going to collect sunlight and produce nutrients to feed this coral. A really interesting dynamic they have. I think they're illustrating that here as well. You can see they're looking at some of the algae under a microscope, and it's not present in the bleached ones, and it's still present in these thriving ones on the left. So, just one of the big problems we're facing here, specifically in Florida, and what really all over the world: agriculture. What do we do when our yard isn't healthy enough, or when we need to put more nutrients into the soil to help our crops thrive? Fertilize it. 9 times out of 10, that means we're spraying animal manure full of phosphates all over. Essentially, we're spraying phosphates all over our crops and our yard. makes sense because the plants thrive on that stuff and they bloom a little bit more productively. Here you can see these are staghorn corals that are now covered in algae like the ones we talked before. This is a field of coral that is mostly dead and actively decaying. It's been completely overtaken by algae. You can see the process here as they start to creep up the coral. The algae starts to creep up onto the dead coral. This is all bleached dead coral. And again, these are all photos taken around a few different locations in the Florida Keys. This is just a close-up example of it. You can tell there's other things that are still thriving in this area. Like there's a big blue fan coral in the corner there. I probably can't see that. Okay, my head's not blocking it. But so again, if you were to look at a map of Florida, let's see if somebody has like a farmland map. Wow, okay, that's pretty interesting infographic. There's got to be a better one. Not quite what I'm looking at. Ooh, yeah, what year is this? Future land use. Okay. This is interesting. So this is from 2020. The pink spots are ones they don't have any data for, which there's not a whole lot of them. Light blue, which is super confusing. So this light kind of aqua green blue that takes up a huge amount of the state is reserved for agriculture. 15,437,000 acres. That's a lot of agriculture, which makes sense. We got a lot of people to feed. Or in a lot of cases, a lot of livestock to feed. I saw an interesting stat over the weekend in a documentary called Eating Our Way to Extinction, that apparently 1/3 of all plants grown ends up as feed for livestock. It's pretty crazy. So the dark red stuff, which I only see a little bit of down here in Southeast Florida and in around Orlando, is commercial. That's going to be only when you zoom way in. Conservation is the dark green. So like down here in the Everglades and kind of peppered throughout, not as much as you would think, considering how wild a lot of the state is. Pretty surprising. Like the vast majority of this stuff is reserved for agriculture. And you'll see here right in the middle of this map, the big lake right in the middle of the state, right? That's Lake Okeechobee. Lake Okeechobee is a big topic in terms of wildlife conservation and just environmental conservation right now. Because the Army Corps of Engineers a long time ago, hold on. When was the Okeechobee Dike built? In 1928, following a hurricane, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers began the construction of the Herbert Hoover Dike in the 1930s to prevent future flooding disasters. So they had a really bad flood that sparked all of that. So, thinking they're doing a good thing, right? The Army Corps of Engineers gets brought on to create a massive dike system around Lake Okeechobee with walls that go up to 15 feet. They can hold up to 15 feet of backed up rainfall in the lake. Which is crazy. If you think about this lake is big enough you can see it from space. So, like, without even really having to zoom in very far. So, an extra 15 feet of water, that's a lot of water. I'm trying to find a picture that really does a good job of illustrating just how deep that is. You can kind of tell just how deep it is. Look at those walls on the side right there. That's pretty crazy. Last week in my environmental science class, we looked... Oh yeah, I forgot you're taking that right now. We looked at how much different livestock needed. Beef cattle is by far the worst. Yeah, not just land, but also water. Yeah, what was really surprising to me was that they mentioned even chickens. Even farming chickens are... Like, if you combine the greenhouse gases produced by chickens and cattle, it's worse in terms of its of the end result. It doesn't necessarily produce more CO2 than vehicles, but the end result is more dramatic because you think about it, cars are producing CO2, right? Vehicles are producing CO2, but cattle and chickens, not even just like from cow farts, but apparently they belch a lot too in the process of digesting plants. But when they do this, they're not just producing CO2, they're exhaling and producing CO2, but they're also producing methane and nitrous oxide. And those gases retain heat, cause the atmosphere to retain heat at a much more dramatic rate than just CO2. So when you look at the heat retention from that, the heat retention from those gases that's released by the livestock is far worse than the combustion engines. That is not to say, like, okay, you heard it here, Shark Geek said cars aren't bad. No, like, combustion engines are a nightmare. It's really bad. Like, if aliens came and visited us right now for the first time, they'd be like, oh my god, how cute, look, they're still on combustion engines. You know? Like, it's really a primitive propulsion method that is absolutely having a negative impact on our environment. This is just to say how much more dramatic wildlife or animal agriculture and its impact is. Which is one big reason, actually, for the last couple months now, my wife and I have been going more and more plant-based in our food. Just to help us sleep a little better at night, because we know that we're not having the impact of supporting animal agriculture, and it is really a nasty, nasty thing. But mostly just to avoid all the antibiotics and growth hormones that come in that food. Alien, do you even quantum, bro? I need that on a t-shirt. Logically, we should all be vegetarians, but I do love to... Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Like, there's so many things out there that, like, I love that I don't eat. I'll give you a perfect example. We'll come back to this in a minute. Shrimp. I freaking love shrimp. Okay? I haven't ordered shrimp on purpose and eaten it, like, just fried shrimp, in years. There may have been a couple of occasions where, like, we had some on my wife's birthday, right? She wanted sushi for her birthday. It's a special occasion. Treat yourself, of course. But 9 times out of 10, if given the option, I avoid it. Because the more you learn about it, the more horrendous you realize it is. Like, shrimp trawler trails. So, shrimp is harvested through bottom trawling. And what that means... Let's see if I can find a good picture of a bottom trawling net. Yeah, here we go. Oh, I love this example. So this is the Monterey Bay Aquarium put together a couple of renders to show different fishing methods. This is how shrimp are harvested. This is an example of how bottom trawling works.
A bottom trawl is a type of fishing net that's pulled along the seafloor.
These are all weights on the bottom.
Fishermen commonly use bottom trawls to catch shrimp and bottom-dwelling fish like halibut and sole. In addition to these target fish, however, the nets also catch a variety of ocean life that's usually thrown back, dead or dying. Dragging heavy gear across the seabed can also damage sensitive seafloor habitat. Reducing the harmful effects of bottom trawling requires either modifying the fishing gear or limiting the areas where trawling is allowed to protect sensitive bottom-dwelling organisms and their habitat.
So, bottom line, they drag heavy equipment across the seafloor to harvest shrimp. And if you look at satellite imagery, you can see the trails left behind. Yeah, because shrimp live in the reefs, right? They live in the cover. So the most effective way to get them to feed demand is to drag nets across the bottom. Why don't people have some kind of way to farm shrimp in a tank? I have no idea. Seems like something that would be relatively easy to me, so I have to just think that it's just more expensive than doing this. But the fact of the matter is, people don't do that. I've never seen like shrimp at the grocery store that was like farm-produced shrimp. You know, like I've never heard of that being a thing. It's usually probably safe to say always the case that it's being harvested this way. Now I have heard of they also sometimes people will catch shrimp by just like finding a lot of shrimp in a condensed area and dropping nets over the top of them. That's not nearly as effective as bottom trawling. Had no idea this is how they did that. Yeah. The more you know, the more it shatters the glass, am I right? I worked on eco cruise ships for a number of years and we convinced the owner to quit serving shrimps. Neil, that is the coolest thing I have heard in a very long time. And I am so proud of you and whoever you convinced. Are you at liberty of telling us about like what cruise line this is or anything like that? Because I would love to know more about that. But yeah, let's go to Google Earth. I bet you we could find shrimp trawling in the United States, leaving trails like this somewhere without having to spend too much time on it. Let's see how long it takes. Let's start a timer right here. Hold on. Let me get a timer on my phone. See how long it takes me to find shrimp trawler trails. But yeah, you think about it, those nets are just ripping up coral reefs, completely destroying everything in their path along that way. So everywhere you see that dust cloud where they've been, everything's gone. Completely destroyed the habitat that probably took years to up to hundreds of years to produce, depending on where they are and how big the coral is there. There's brain corals like in protected places like the Texas flower gardens that are probably 1,000 years old. I remember seeing a picture of a brain coral they said was 500 years old based on the size. What was that stat? Let me make sure I'm not talking out of my bobo over here. Oldest known brain coral is 2,000 years old. Okay, located off in Tobago. Yeah, so I think they saw one at Flower Gardens that was like 500 years old. Something's going on with my microphone feedback. It's picking up something. Hold on. Why is it? my noise gate is doing something weird. There's like a clicking happening. And it's coming from the mic itself. Alright, I'm gonna restart or not OBS. I'm gonna restart my DAW real quick so we get rid of this audio issue. Hang on. Okay, it's still doing it. Let's reset the interface. Can y'all hear me now? I turned on the microphone for the camera. The Razer Kaio speaker. Here we go. Land required to produce 1 kilogram of protein. Pork. Yeah, okay, so at least we have a backup mic that I can use. This is ridiculous, dude. This is the second time this has ever happened. Last time, an audio device changed a setting in OBS automatically, and it was this one. Last time what happened is it changed this device for my Reaper source from Focusrite USB ASIO to Positive Grid USB audio device, which is this thing. This little travel guitar amplifier. This time it didn't do that. If I look in the control panel, it's on safe mode, which is weird. Don't want to mess with that right now. Buffer should be fine. My only thought is that maybe opening Google Earth caused a memory issue and I ran out of audio memory. But we did have to reboot the audio interface. So that may have just interrupted the connection to OBS. But so I have this plugin you see on the top here is what Reaper is sending. Reaper is my audio DAW that I use for recording stuff. This is actually the project file for that Fruit Fly song that I did. And it's working fine. You can see it's sending audio. We've got, what is that, going up almost to like 0 dB. But this is the same plugin made by the people who make this audio DAW in OBS, just not functioning at all. I don't know what that's all about. It's configured right. I can disable it and re-enable it, and that doesn't seem to fix anything. We already saw all the properties listed there. It's input 1. If I put both inputs to input 1, it's still not getting anything. We've already looked at that. It says it's synced. That should be fine. So land required to produce 1 kilogram of protein. Pork, 90 square meters. Eggs, 22 square meters. Chicken, 14 square meters. Milk, 23 and a half square meters. Huh. So milk is still more than eggs and chicken. That's crazy. That's something we talked about too a lot. My wife and I were talking about milk production over the weekend. We were like, I guess technically if we were gonna get completely off of animal stuff, we'd have to give up cheese. You know, like that's a tough one. I love my cheese. I'm trying to come up with a logical reason why water requirements are higher for beef cattle than for milk cattle. Yeah, I'm not sure. This is the land required, but the land is also water required to produce 1 kilogram of protein. Pork, eggs, chicken. It's interesting that pork is higher on both counts. I didn't know that pork was so needy. Huh. Anyway, if you wanted to check it out yourself, we'll get back to this satellite searching here in a sec. But the documentary I saw, it was actually really, really interesting. I highly recommend it. Narrated by Kate Winslet. It's called Eating Our Way to Extinction. Some really, really shocking infographics, and some of the data they put in there was just crazy. But it's not like a super dry, boring documentary. It's really stimulating and interesting, and yeah, if you have an hour or so to kill in an evening, I definitely recommend watching it, but be prepared to never want to eat animals again after watching it. Because, yeah, it's rough. Alright, I got right back to where we were at when we lost audio here. I'm gonna start a timer and see how long it takes me to, let's refresh Google Earth because I feel like I got an unfair advantage here. If at some point you start getting an audio double from me, that means my audio source has fixed itself. If that happens, please somebody say something and I'll nip it in the bud as quickly as I can. Now, the one thing that seems like an unfair advantage on my side is that at least with the web browser version of Google Earth, you see the water's covered up with those 3D models, so I'm not actually seeing satellite pictures of the water. So a lot of the places where you would see shrimp trawlers dragging the bottom is covered up by that blue stuff, and you can't turn that off in the web browser version. In the desktop version, you may be able to do that. All right, I'm starting the timer right now. We're zooming in on Louisiana, so let's go back. Here's a section of shoreline that's not occluded by the blue fog of war, or whatever you want to call it. Already, here's a bunch. Here's some trawling trails right here. You can see them kind of doing their zigzag thing, going out and back. Let's just keep going up the coastline. These definitely, these are not, this is not a pleasure cruise right here. All right, stop. Took me 45 seconds to find shrimp trawlers. That's not very long. You can tell that's what they're doing because they're going back and forth in kind of a zigzag pattern, you know, and like covering more ground that way. You can see they just punch out, turn around, come right back, go right back out, turn right back. What in the hell just happened? KP? What's going on? Hey, I heard you weren't feeling so good tonight and you had to cancel your stream. I'm so sorry to hear that. You just wanted to come in here and throw me off my game and start a hype train. Well, it worked. What's up, Kay? How you doing? Can't hear me. Get emoji'd. So cool. Who did we get? Genie Cat got one. Barry got one. Silly Munchkins for life. I don't know that I've ever seen that person talk in the chat before. Mr. DNA 32. I like that. Like Mr. DNA from Jurassic Park. That girl Crash. I am familiar with that girl Crash. I did go full Hank Hill, I'll tell you what. K, stop it. K. I already put you right underneath Raven. No, I can't stop you. You're right. I can try. It won't work. I know better. She must have had too much of that good cough syrup. Anyway, hope you're feeling better, Kay. I hope you get back on your feet quick. Fuda, I saw that community sub. Thank you so much. Landed on GMR Kitty. Oh, dang. That already put us already into a level 5 hype train. That's crazy. Crazy. Well, I think we illustrated our point here, and Google Earth is so slow, I'm going to go ahead and close it down. Yeah, shrimp trawling. Shrimp, delicious. Shrimp trawling, way less so. Way, way less so. It's a problem. And I mean, I really hope that somebody figures out a way to farm them that's more ecologically sustainable, but until then, that's what we're dealing with, is whole swaths of reef being ripped out by nets that you can see from space. And stuff like that, that was just one day's worth of it you saw right there. That was just whatever day those pictures were taken. So those huge amounts of like acres of reef, that's happening daily. So how is coral supposed to, this is a question I don't have the answer to, seriously. I don't understand, how is coral supposed to recover from all of the under pressure, other things it's under pressure from, when we're allowing things like that to happen? But I mean, good luck getting on a microphone at a press conference and telling the world you've got to stop eating shrimp. You get laughed off the stage. So one of the things we were looking at is aquaculture. It is way more sustainable than land livestock. It isn't perfect, but it is much better. Yeah. Yeah, and they talk about that too. They talk about that in that documentary I was mentioning. They talk about fish farming, which, man, I really want to believe in fish farming, but there's some skeevy stuff going on with that too. Like, did you know that apparently 1/3 of the fish that is caught is fed back to fish at fish farms? All fish caught in the world, 1/3 of all fish that's captured is chopped up and fed back to fish in fish farms. That to me is the very definition of inefficient. It's crazy talk. Yeah, well, not less so chump, kind of, but like more so they feed them fish oil, like bits of dried fish protein. I'm guessing by aquaculture, like, let me look that up. Hold on. So by aquaculture, you mean like hydroponic farming? Oh no, so actually meaning like fish farming. Yeah, no, that I won't eat fish that's been farmed. There's a whole lot of problems with that. It's just so much easier for disease to spread inside the farms. So this is what aquaculture looks like. You have these pens that fish are trapped in, and they disperse food and chemicals into the pens because the fish are super tight and confined, right, into a little space like this. This is just one not so great example, but how congested it is in there is what I'm trying to illustrate. So if there are new ways of doing aquaculture that I'm not aware of that are less damaging, great. But the aquaculture I'm aware of looks like this. So for example, they'll farm salmon in these. And again, they're way more susceptible to parasites and disease because there's no predators in there cleaning out the diseased ones like we talked about before. And they're really confined. So there's tons of fish in a small space. So what do? They want to protect their product, right? So a lot of them start dying off and they lose money, so they'll pour chemicals to kill the parasites and the disease over the tops of the fish. Chemicals that you're now ingesting by eating the fish. They did samples on the meat, and it actually does retain some of the chemicals that they put in there to kill parasites. And this is all stuff they go over in that documentary as well. I knew about this stuff before watching that doc, but it really kind of went into like the nitty-gritty details on how exactly all of it works. Here we go. Ins and outs of large-scale aquaculture. This looks like a valuable infographic. Industrially produced feed, which... Oh, got a hype chest. Let's see what we got. Kay, thank you so much for the hype train. Second one we got tonight. 2 hype trains in one day. We're breaking all kinds of records for the stream. We got the no they didn't emote. Oh man. that one's pretty unhinged. There's just a lot going on. That's a very excited little monkey, a very terrified little monkey. Ooh, these look pretty advanced. So industrially produced feed, which in the case of fish is what I was talking about, is more often than not other fish that they've caught to feed to said fish that they're farming. Introduction of non-native species. So, for example, let's say there is a lot of cod in Sweden, but they're not farming cod, which is a species that's found there natively. Maybe they're farming something that doesn't normally exist there. There's antibiotics, hormones, aesthetics, and pigments. The meat you get out of farmed fish tends to be a little bit lighter in color, and so like in the case of salmon, for example, they will dye it to make it look a little more pink. You have no idea what's in those dyes. Like I know I can tell you for one, yellow 5 that's in almost everything we eat now. It's in the Mio that I add to my water, is tartrazine. And tartrazine is an oil byproduct. So it's not something you want in your food. I'm sure the dye they use in the fish is probably not that much better. Chemical treatments, that's what we talked about with like the anti-parasitics and things like that. Drug and chemical residues and non-native diseases and parasites. So the fish that they're bringing in to farm may be carrying diseases from outside. Kind of like how you're not allowed to like bring firewood into a state park for camping. You have to buy wood from the park because there might be parasites in that wood that they don't want to introduce into the park. Well, that's something that can happen here as well. And then you could have breaks in net, which cause the escape of a non-native species, and who knows what effect that would have. Throwing your Mio away tomorrow. Don't waste it. But I mean, like, maybe use it, but yeah, probably don't keep doing that going forward. I'm actually on the hunt for I like the Mio because it's a B12 supplement, right? And if we're eating plant-based as much as we are lately, you need to find a supplement for B12, and sometimes that just means like a certain plant. Like Mita, are you paying attention? You remember what plant? Was it black beans or something we said we have to eat to get our B12 dose? But anyway, if you don't get it through that, one way I supplement it is through water additives. So I'm actually on the hunt for one that doesn't have dye in it, because yeah, tartrazine has all kinds of nasty stuff linked to it, like cancers, heart disease. It's a pretty gross chemical. I've learned just over the past year alone, I've learned way more about food additives than I ever wanted to know in my life. Algae is good for B12, okay. I bet I could get like some matcha. I bet that might do the trick. I don't believe there's any plant that has B12. Let's see. Matcha contains trace amounts of vitamin B12, but some matcha products also contain added vitamin B12. Well, Better than nothing. Now we're just learning about dietary stuff. Common natural sources of B12. Eggs, okay, but if we're keep looking, if we're trying to get away from animals. Eggs, clams, beef, salmon, poultry. We know we can get it from stuff like that. Some plant milks. Okay. Yogurt? Well, again, that's a dairy product. Nutritional yeast. Okay, that's interesting. I know Mita was talking about getting our hands on some nutritional yeast because they say it tastes like Parmesan. This is nutritional yeast, and in here it looks like fish food flakes. That's very much the vibe I'm getting from this. But I'm told that you can get it as a cheese replacement. Yeah, this powder is nutritional yeast. And supposedly you can make like vegan cheese out of it. And I'm told it tastes very similar to Parm. That's something we've been talking about trying out. So apparently this stuff is a really good B12 source. So you can make the cheese, put it on anything like they put it on some broccoli here. I could make some nachos. Put some jalapenos up on there. What else is a good sort? Fortified cereals. Obviously they're just adding it to the cereals. Mostly meat and dairy. Seems like oysters, clams, mushrooms. Okay. Among edible mushrooms, relatively high levels of vitamin B12 were detected in the commonly available shiitake mushroom. There you go. Shiitake mushrooms are a viable source of B12. Nobody's eating those every day, let's be honest. But yeah, if you mix it in like maybe once a week, that's probably do the trick. Yeah, it's crazy. Look at this. So look at this is the search I did. These are all the like common naturally occurring sources of it, and all except the ones I just listed are animal products. Pretty crazy. Fortified grains, dairy products, and liver high in B12. Let's see. Plant sources of B12. Fortified plant-based foods contain. Okay. Aha, nori. We've done this thing where we make like sushi, but like in a cupcake. So you have like a cupcake mold, and you put some nori paper in there, and you put some rice on top of that, and then whatever else you're gonna put on top of that. So nori paper seems like that'd be good. Also called purple lavar, is a good source of vitamin B12. Good to know. Already a fan of nori. Tempeh spirulina. I knew it. You said algae. Vitamin B12 content in spirulina platensis. I bet we can mix that into some smoothies. I'm definitely not the type to make like, you know, like wheatgrass shakes and all that, but, you know, so I don't want it to be like the overpowering factor, but I'm sure we could get more than enough of the B12 we need from spirulina and just put it in like our fruit smoothies we already make, and it'd probably be pretty good. I bet you wouldn't notice. It's crazy though how much of that came from, okay, lentils. Lentils are also a good source. Haha! But it's crazy how much of that came from animals. It's almost as if we were supposed supposed to utilize the animals for our nutrition and sustenance. Right, but as we were just talking about earlier, Fiber, pretty much we have a choice to make, and the choice is between eating animals and going extinct, or eating plants and not. I choose the latter. But also just, I mean, because it's not so easy for me to be able to get like a whole cattle, you know, like a whole cow harvested, I can't be certain that it's damn near impossible for me to be certain that the meat I'm getting is not full of antibiotics and growth hormones. And in fact, in most cases it is. And I can tell you just from the 2 months that we've been on plant-based diet, I feel so much better. It's crazy. Like, you don't know you're bloated until you're not bloated, you know? Like, feeling just like you're full and your skin stretched, like, just at all times. Totally inflamed. But yeah, more energy, less bloated. I can't say enough good things about it. Let's scoot up a little bit here. Used to work at a plant that made beta carotene, and it's already used as a dye, just not sure. Whoop. Oh, the ad break thing got me. Just not sure why isn't it used more frequently. Maybe cost? I'd be curious to do a low-scale proof of concept and document cost along with other KPIs. Yeah. UD did ban red dye number 3. Or US did ban red dye number 3, so maybe beta carotene would be a better choice now. Yeah, it could be. I think red 40, I think, was the one that's your body really doesn't get along with very well. Unless you know a guy down the road who raises one for. Yeah, exactly. I do know somebody who does that. Like, there's a farm not that far from here that, like, a guy we know will get like a cow butchered once a year. We've talked about doing that, but honestly, I'm not missing the meat. So, find a nearby farm that sells to the public. Maybe a stretch there, but parents found a farm nearby that does their own cattle ranching, slaughtering, and selling. Solid business. But yeah, basically. Area guy down the road, or a guy down the road, yeah, that's the way to go. Like, if you absolutely have to have meat, definitely want to make sure you're doing something like that where you can be certain that they're not putting crazy amounts of antibiotics and growth hormones into it, which is hard to find today because they're so incentivized to put those hormones in there to maximize their crop or their harvest. Yeah. Crazy times. But at the end of the day, it was an easy decision for me. Like, we don't need it. It's not, there's nothing that we can't get from some other source. So why even gamble with it? And I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't easy. Like, we went through some recipes that really stank, but we found a bunch that we really liked. Stuck it out. My wife's really stepped up her cooking game, and she's found some pretty incredible stuff that I can't imagine not having. So let's see, we were talking about fish farms and all the way into, it took 45 seconds to find traces of shrimp trawling on Google Earth. That's crazy to me. Oh, there is actually a paper that is on something ocean related, an ocean biology article that I saw that has nothing to do with sharks, but it's still pretty cool. What is that thing called? Bathynomus vaderi. Yeah, okay. Let's have a look at this. Anyway, yeah, so Fiber, the reason we went down this rabbit hole is we were talking about fish farming and the inherent problems that come with that, and I was talking about a documentary I saw on the plane on the way down here that talks about the impacts of agriculture both on farming plants and on farming animals, and just it's called eating ourselves into extinction, and it is one of the most shocking things I've ever seen. Really kind of reinforced to me that we were making the right, as if I needed more affirmation that we're doing the right thing, eating plants. This really drove it home for me. I was like, oh my god, like we're so effed. Animal agriculture is really pushing us over a cliff into the next extinction. So Bathynomus vaderi, you may notice the use of Vader in the name here. This was something I found out last week is making waves. Pun intended. People are all excited about this crustacean. This is a giant isopod. You may have heard the name isopod before, because that's what pillbugs are, or roly-polies. This is a type of isopod most people will have encountered. Everybody's turned over a rock as a kid and found a roly-poly in the yard, right? These are isopods. Nightmare fuel? It wouldn't be a good stream if I didn't give you a little bit of nightmare fuel. So, what does isopod mean again? I forget. Any of a large order of isopoda, small, sessile-eyed, or aquatic or terrestrial crustaceans with the body composed of 7 free thoracic segments, each bearing a pair of similar legs. Yeah, so they have segmented bodies. Okay, so I think they have, yeah, so their legs are isolated feet. It means each segment of their body has its own pair of feet. So each of these segments has one leg on each side. So everybody's all excited about this particular isopod. And I couldn't understand why, because these large ones like this size, and here's the nightmare fuel side of it, but like this giant isopod scale here, the size of it's nothing new. Really, like, we already knew these existed. They eat dead things at the bottom of the ocean. Whenever there's a whale fall, especially, you'll find tons of these eating the whale carcass. The deeper you go, the more likely you are to see these guys. This is what they look like on the underside here with their legs. You see they've got two legs for each segment of the body there. Pretty crazy looking, but generally harmless. There's really not that much of a fundamental difference between this and the pillbugs you'd see on land. Aside from the size, obviously, and, gills. But the only major difference, these things started getting a lot of attention recently because they're now fishing them in Vietnam and eating them as a delicacy there. So they're harvesting these in the South China Sea, and people notice a difference in the eye shape. And since they're getting so much attention and being eaten more commonly, they've decided to do some more studies on them and just to kind of figure out, like, what is their distribution, how fast they reproduce, all that stuff. What's, what chemicals are we finding in their tissues? Are people eating anything harmful by eating these, stuff like that? I have no idea the results of any of that. That's still ongoing. All people are talking about right now is their difference in appearance, and apparently they gave them... So Bathynomus is the name of the order of these giant isopods, but Vaderi is just the name they gave to this one because they thought its eyes and the top of its head resembled Darth Vader's helmet. Turgis, thank you for the lurk. I appreciate you. I don't have a lurk command just yet, but I just put in a reminder to make one. So that'll be coming this week. So there you go. New discovery within the past month. A new giant isopod that looks like everybody's favorite space villain. Ooh, that mouth is pretty gnarly. I can't even imagine seeing it like moving in a video. Oh,
Should we look at a YouTube of giant isopods? I kind of feel like we should. Like 12 to 13 inches, like, yeah. The giant isopod. Yeah, okay, show me.
Giant isopods are deep-sea crustaceans in the genus Bathynomus. The group includes about 20 species.
Look at the way they swim. Ah, like all those flaps on the underside just go. What the hell?
Including what is thought to be the largest isopod in the world, Bathynomus giganteus. They are abundant in the cold, deep waters of the Atlantic, Indian, and Pacific Oceans, where the water pressure is intense. With the largest species reaching over 14 inches long, giant isopods exhibit deep-sea gigantism. This is likely caused by colder temperatures and longer lifespans. This makes them significantly larger than their smaller isopod relatives. They prefer muddy bottoms at depths between 560 to 7,000 feet deep. They have large reflective eyes and 14 legs. Their segmented body has 2 pairs of antennae. The abdomen has limbs called pleopods that are used for swimming and respiration.
That's what those little flap things are. For respiration, too? Okay. So they're called pleopods. I guess pod meaning like a method of locomotion, like leg. I forget what pleo is. I think it just means like swimming. Like plesiosaur meant like swimming lizard. I think. Let me verify that. Means more? It's got to have another meaning than that. A forked swimming limb of a crustacean. So, like, they have these on lobsters, too. And mantis shrimps. More pods, yeah. So, wait, though. They just said these things are not just used for propulsion, but they breathe out of them. That's their gills, too.
Giant isopods are important deep-sea scavengers that are used for pleopods that are used for swimming and respiration. Giant isopods are important deep-sea scavengers. They feed on dead creatures like whales that have fallen to the seafloor, but they may also feed on slow-moving or sessile animals. Their mouth parts are highly adapted to cut and ingest large chunks of food.
I don't like eating stuff that eats
A
dead
large
stuff.
and flexible gut maximizes food ingestion. They can rapidly detect dead animals by chemoreception. They can go a long time without food.
Chemoreception, meaning they detect the chemicals put off by decomposition. But they look delicious.
Tiny relatives. Giant isopods can roll into a ball when threatened. Their hard skeleton protects them from predators. Female isopods lay eggs. They develop a special pouch to hold the eggs and the newly hatched babies. The young emerge from the pouch as miniature adults. Sometimes giant isopods get caught in deep water trawling nets. They are commonly caught in baited traps. Some are kept in aquariums. In some parts of Asia, giant isopods are considered a delicacy. They are said to taste like lobster. For more marine facts...
Alright. So there you have it. The one new species discovery I could find that occurred since the last time we talked about it. Bathynomus vaderi. Or Nightmaricus fulis. So creepy. He doesn't seem to be creeped out by it. Look, he's having the time of his life. That dude's like, look, dinner.
to think there's just like a place selling these for food. I think you just go into this shopping center and there's a bucket of these. I love lobster, but I ain't eating that. See, that's my thing. I'm not really a lobster guy either. Like, you know, it's like, I feel it's true what they say. It's just a sponge for butter and garlic, right? Which, you can say the same thing about escargot, which strangely enough, I love. I really like escargot. But it really is just soaking up butter and garlic. But yeah, I guess so. I guess I have to eat those words because that's the one bug I do eat. I was just gonna say I don't eat bugs. So like, and I don't understand. Can somebody break this down for me? Like, why is it that so many people think the idea of eating an insect, a land-based insect, is so gross, so repulsive, no matter how clean it is? But we eat ocean bugs like they're going out of style. Like all crustaceans, shrimp, lobster, crabs, those are bugs. Convince me they're not. They're all arthropods. They belong to the same category. They're literally bugs. But yeah, no, actually that was Wheels, that was not intended. But yeah, it landed. Everything is better with garlic butter. Actually, dude, oh man, okay, this is worth the rabbit hole. So this one recipe that I thought was gonna be super gross, but is one of my favorites now, is cauliflower steaks, which sound like blasphemy to my inner Texan, but okay, look at that. Now, it's every bit as simple as you think. Like, you literally just, like, sear, you cut the cauliflower into, like, thick slabs, like a steak, and sear it. And then once it's seared, you rub it down with, like, you have some garlic cooked down so that it crushes real easy, and mix it with some butter, and just paint that crap onto the seared cauliflower. Holy crap, so good. You have to cook them just right though, because if you do it a little too much, they get like soggy. But yeah, if you get a little bit of sear on it, it gives that texture, and that's just freaking amazing. Little things like that are winning me over to plant-based stuff. Here's one that I think they had like a side of chickpeas and spinach. That one looks a little maybe overdone. But yeah, definitely recommend. Sparking my hunger, so yeah, me too. Sorry. Well, look at more sea bugs. Look at more sea bugs. Get rid of the appetite. This is all just about ocean insects. Yuck. What the heck is that thing? Oh, it's just a bee with a sticker on it. So, I hope at least through all the rabbit holes and whatnot, we've covered a lot of the points I wanted to make as to what sharks do for the environment. Why are they important? It's not simply that, you know, a lot of people, more people than I would like to think, are aware that they help keep populations of fish from just exploding, right? They help regulate the numbers of fish. And most people that know anything about them will know that, so I've found. But what people don't realize is that in doing that, they also regulate disease and some of the other things we talked about, like protecting seagrass from being devoured completely by sea turtles, and you know, whatever other grazers you may have, like manatees or dugongs. You know, there's a lot to what they have to offer that goes beyond just regulating population numbers of fish. So next Tuesday, since we covered all the different things that sharks bring to the ecological table, tonight. I hope everybody's got at least a little bit of a better understanding of what sharks' role in the environment is, why they're important to the ecosystem. We absolutely cannot get by without them, and there is a direct relationship to the health of the ecosystem and how many sharks you have in that body of water. But next week, we'll do more of a deep dive, pun intended, into the different things that are causing sharks to be under pressure, the different things that they're struggling against right now. And there is more than one. It's not just fishing. But we've got 10 minutes left, and I did promise you some crazy footage, and I still have it. I haven't forgotten. So we were talking about Lake Okeechobee and how they built a massive dike around it in the 30s after a nasty hurricane happened and flooded everything south of there. Let's see. Where is my drone footage of that? So, Lake Okeechobee drainage map. We were talking about how fertilizers are a huge, it looked like something out of MIB, yeah, totally. So Lake Okeechobee retains water, right, and is surrounded by farmland completely. And so all the phosphates that are getting put into the soil around that are compounding into the lake. Even more so because of the dam that they build all the way around it. So when they release that water, huge amounts of concentrated phosphates that have settled to the bottom get churned up and dumped into the rivers, mainly two river systems. The St. Lucie River that goes from Lake Okeechobee out to Stewart at the Stewart Inlet, which in here in this pink box, that's my neighborhood. This is where I'm at. So that affects me directly, and I'll show you how here in a second. Or really the first time we directly saw the impact of that and knew without a shadow of a doubt that it was that. And then you have the Caloosahatchee, which goes out towards Cape Coral here and dumps out there. And mind you, I don't know about the one in Cape Coral, but the inlet here in Stewart wasn't even there a couple hundred years ago. That was a man-made inlet. This was a closed-off section of the Intercoastal Waterway, the ICW, that goes all the way around the edge of the state. And that was just closed off as part of the Indian River right there, they call it. But they opened it up. And so one day, we went to the beach just south of Stewart there, and I was flying around with my drone looking for rays. I saw one eagle ray fly through, and I got all excited. I was trying to film it, and then all I did was fly a little bit north of there, and we saw some pretty horrific stuff. And it kind of gave a pretty solid example for the ecological impact of all of those phosphates building up in the water. Now, normally, where you would see brackish water mixing with salt water, it's going to look something like this. It's going to look something like this. You're going to see a clear difference in the water where it's mixing. So the salt water and the brackish water actually struggle to mix because their chemical makeup is so different. So it's really easy to notice. This is a little bit more dramatic. It's going to look a little bit more like this. But in places in South America, you have like a stark line like that. But this is an example of maybe a more healthy location. And I have some examples of both. So let me pull those up. so here's some examples of a healthy inlet. So I was just getting some like B-roll footage here. This is in Fort Pierce, Florida, which is actually north of us. You can already see here, like granted it's pretty milky, because the sand's getting churned up. You can already see pretty clearly, I've got 2 of these clips by the way, where like the water coming out of the ICW is a little darker. There's definitely a difference in sediment composition and things like that between the water inside the inlet and the water outside the inlet. But I wouldn't call it that unhealthy. You can see the color change right off in the distance, right? Where it shifts to just salt seawater and the current's going north, so it's kind of pushing it all that way. It's already kind of mixed here, but you can see there right in the middle of the screen, this curve right here where my mouse is going is where the mixture starts, and it goes northeast from there. So yeah, exactly, Neil. We've had some nasty algal blooms here, and there's a history of nasty algal blooms like red tides, toxic blue algae, and that happens whenever, well, one major factor in it happening is when they open the dikes to allow the water to flow through the lock system out of the rivers and into the ocean. That rush of water coming out of the dam churns up the phosphates. So phosphates come out of the groundwater, right, from putting it on farmland in people's yards, or just in sewage that gets dumped out into the ocean or seeps out of pipes and things like that. It goes through the water table into the ocean, and then those phosphates will settle on the bottom. But when they dump water out of the dam, it churns up all those phosphates that have settled and kind of reintroduces them into the water, and the algae goes nuts. So that's when you see these really big out of control blooms, is when there's releases from the dam. Otherwise a pretty nice spot. But so this is an example of what I would even call a pretty healthy inlet, and you'll see why I say that in a minute. Look at this, people like to go play on the edge of this jetty here. You wouldn't catch me dead that far out because this is completely destroyed, and people just filled it up with like bags of Quikrete. I go up to the part where the sidewalk stops. That guy out there fishing can have the rest. Get all those nutrients and they open the dams. Yeah, exactly. So it oxygenates the water and stirs up the phosphates from the bottom, which is kind of a 1-2 punch in giving the algae everything it needs to thrive. So you see rapid reproduction of the algae when that happens. Alright, so now, fast forward to the time we went to visit the Stewart Inlet, the beach south of the Stewart Inlet. So here it is, and right off the start, you can see this is still kind of green stained, but that's not uncommon for this area. I don't know how much of that is contributed to by pollution, but you can see a clear difference between the water in the intercoastal, which is back here. So this is looking back inland. Right now, behind the drone is pointing to the open ocean. So this is the beach out on the ocean. I'm over the salt water right now, and this is all the brackish water inside the ICW on the other side of the land there. All right, and we're going north. And as we go north, look at that. There's all the phosphates from your agricultural and residential fertilizing right there. Making my beaches look like freaking Ecto Cooler. Who remembers Ecto Cooler from IC? I almost threw up when I saw this. All of this is extremely prolific reef. I saw all kinds of fish, some sharks, and a couple of eagle rays swimming through this reef. I saw people fishing out here. right next to it. Just a wall of dookie water. It's all animal and human waste. Gross. And yet it wasn't until very recently that the Army Corps of Engineers even acknowledged, it wasn't until last year that the Army Corps of Engineers acknowledged that this lock system might actually have an impact on algae. I took the drone and just went up a little higher here to about like 400 or 500 feet. No, it's 400 feet. What am I talking about? The ceiling's 5, or the ceiling's 4. So I went up as high as I could to just see how far it reaches. As you can see, it's pretty dang far. So that up in the upper left-hand corner is a big dredging barge. That's a pretty large ship, so that's probably a good mile or two away from us to the north. And these are all just like recreational boats, fishing charters, stuff like that. So this, everything from, and to the left of us are about 50 feet from the beach. So from there all the way out here to your right, all that dark stuff, and then curving back around and going out a little bit to the northeast, and just everything north of there completely engulfed in this nasty, almost like neon green brownish water. Crazy stuff. And I've looked up pictures of algal blooms around here. Like this is actually from another location where the pine trees go like right up to the edge here. You can see sometimes they'll have like coffee stained water instead of like that green filth that we've got. This is I don't know where specifically this is. That's outside of it being in Florida. Why can't I dock this? There we go. So here, just for comparison, there's my picture versus the other one. Yeah. Just something to think about when we think about, you know, this is why like my wife and I stopped putting fertilizer in our yard. Our yard is right next to a mangrove. So anything I put in the soil here is going to go straight into the mangroves, straight into the river, right out to the ocean and contribute to this. So we stopped doing anything to it. It's outside of just watering it. And something cool actually happened. We have now, I guess you could say we've like rewilded our yard. There is still some of the grass that was originally there, but it was overtaken by a local plant that some consider a weed, but I think is beautiful, and the bees seem to love it. We have a neighbor that has a couple of beehives. I'm sure now after the... Yep, okay, it's messing it up. So it's called Florida Snow, this flower. It's like a weed that, it's like a vine that creeps across the yard. But now when I look up Florida Snow, I get pictures like this because of that recent winter storm we had. Florida Snow flower. Yeah, let's look at that. Okay, yeah, this is what it actually looks like. So it kind of looks like the yard's covered in snow when they bloom. But it's actually pretty cool. And like I said, the bees seem to really like it, so we're getting a lot more pollinators in our yard. So it kind of works out, you know, just letting the local flora do their thing. But that's, you know, that's just another thing. It goes to show you there's a lot of different factors in this. A lot of people have different stock in what to do with the land. Like, you know, we're using so much of it for livestock agriculture here that we're dumping fertilizers into fields to get more of a yield out of it for animal feed. And then we have the animal waste itself that contributes to that, and our plumbing, you know, just there's so many things that have a negative impact on the water quality here that I really, really hope we continue to see efforts made to improve that, because we have to. It's just trashing an ecosystem that would otherwise be so absolutely gorgeous. And I feel like Florida and the mangroves here are like the gills of this country, you know, like mangrove trees are so incredibly important to the ecosystem that it tears me up to see habitat that crucial in the world get abused like this. But it's not hopeless. I'm not trying to be all doom and gloom here. So let's look up something fun. Let's look up Florida snow one more time on an end note here, and then we'll find ourselves a raid target. Let's go see if we can't find a video of somebody making a snow angel on a beach. I saw a clip somewhere of somebody making a snow angel. Florida snow. And somebody's making a snow angel in Destin, and I was like, what is going on? Here we go. Where's the shorts? Yeah, show me shorts. Well, that'll happen. Let's look better. This is Panama City, Florida. We should ban people from moving to Florida. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being one of the last ones to to migrate here. We are overdeveloping, that's for sure. If you look at the satellite imagery, you just see the brown, tan concrete just growing and growing. Yeah, palm trees and agave
it's
plants
4:30
and
here
sand
in West Mobile,
and
here's an update with snow totals.
8 inches of snow. So Destin historically has gotten snow maybe a little bit that melts like immediately in, you know, like the same day. This past week when we had the snowstorms, Destin, Florida had a record-breaking 8 inches of snow, and it lasted. It actually stayed for a while. But, you know, climate change isn't real. That's some hippie tree hugger stuff. Alright, y'all. I'm going to find us a raid target. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble for the evening. It's been really fun to explore all this information with you guys. I hope you learned something. I actually learned a little bit in researching this stuff. We'll meet back next week to go over the different adversities that sharks face, both in the environment and from mankind directly. WStream loved it. Thank you so much. Let's see, who should we go pay a visit to tonight? I got a good one. But you know what? First, I need to abuse my power to do shoutouts and tell you guys to go check out Ninja Gloppy. Fantastic human, even better streamer, and has been getting some really, really cool astrophotography stuff done lately. So, let's go see what A Date Night In is up to, since we shouted them out earlier. I'm kind of curious, and we are now new members of their stream team, The Fleet. So we're going to go keep it in the family, so to speak. Raid out to a fellow fleet member. Here are your raid messages. One if you're subscribed, one if you're not. But I'm pretty sure everybody in here is subscribed, thanks to a combined effort from Kay and Scuda. Thank you guys so much. You are absolute legends. We've had a very active night. People like you guys make this possible. I literally would not probably be doing this still and, you know, babbling about nerdy shark information if it wasn't for guys like you supporting us. So thank you so much. It is a huge deal. Let's copy that message and go spam Miss Kyle with a shark raid. Have a great night, y'all. We'll be back here tomorrow to go diving in a shipwreck. So get excited for that. We'll see you tomorrow.
So much for the raid!